Hi, everybody. We're back here at our week 2 recording. Thanks for coming back, and we will be looking at some ideas connected to the reading for this time and also disconnected from the reading this time to give you some perspectives and some other components that we are considering in the course. First, let's do a little bit of network terminology, which is outside this week's reading, because it's something that we normally hear about in various ways. The largest unit of information that a computer can handle is referred to as a bit, and it is a very small fragment. In fact, here you see at the bottom of the screen the letter A and what it looks like in bits. Letter A is composed of 8 separate pieces, 8 separate bits that are transmitted across from computer to computer, and those 8 pieces, those 8 bits, are referred to as a byte. Now, our networks typically share the smallest pieces, the bits, with each other, and the network speeds, which you frequently hear on advertisements when companies are talking about selling us their network, whether it's AT&T or Comcast or whoever that happens to be, providing service to your area. And so we typically refer to the number of bits that are transmitted across the network. So the letters, the words, the numbers are broken down into each letter has 8 bits to it. And speeds now are approaching the billions of bits per second range. But typically, 20 years ago, we were astonished when we were able to get kilobit speed. In other words, thousands of bits crossing the networks. Many schools, and even at home, now you may have megabit speed. And your school district may have gigabit speed that connects you to the internet. In particular, this is important for streaming video, and when lots of classrooms are streaming video, you need lots and lots of capacity. And sometimes you will hear network people call that a pipe. And if you think about water flowing through a pipe, the bigger the diameter of the pipe, the more water it can carry, and so it's analogous here to that. In having different size circles, you can make a comparison between ISDN rate, which is about 128 kilobit rate, which was 20 years ago speed that we had perhaps between schools. Within the school, you may have megabit speed at Ethernet rate, which is the lowest rate is about 10. Now, DSL and cable rates can be adjusted by the provider. The equipment really isn't much different. They just sort of set a speedometer on the network that says you can get this much data to flow to you, just a setting in their equipment. And we are also then getting megabit speeds and also gigabit speeds. So you see the comparisons here between what the capacities are in sharing data. And so the more data that we have, that we need, the bigger the capacity needs to be, or as some network people call it, the pipe. There's no real pipe, it's a wire in many cases, or it's optical, it's an optical thread, it's fiber optics. And so like the picture here indicates, these are separate fibers, and each one of those fibers could carry gigabit speed, and typically then this is what a phone company might have running down the street to carry its data, to carry its networking from place to place within its network. Typically in a building you may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 strands of fiber running from various places to get gigabit speed, perhaps within the building, to carry data within networks. To the reading, this week the one reading from the internet reading talks about the term hypermedia. So our first question for you is what is your understanding of hypermedia? If you would go to the Google document that is in the course wiki where you're finding this recording, then please answer the question, what is hypermedia? The authors from the book this week respond to us or tell us about different types of software. I categorize it a little bit differently from what the authors do, and so let me put my little take on software. And typically the software ends up in three different varieties. One is the productivity software, and that is really the software that you, the teacher, uses or the employees use. The secretary in the office, the principal, other individuals in the district use the productivity software. It can be used for a variety of things. It can be used for your reporting, where you have to give a report to a department chair or to the principal or some other administrative type. It could be the gradebook software that you use, the manner in which you take attendance. You also then have software in which you communicate within the organization, and also then with your larger community, whether your parents or your children or your parents and your children. And then the academic software that you use in your classroom with students for learning, and likely there can be some crossing over of these, and let's give you some examples of that. The productivity software could be considered your Microsoft Word, your Microsoft Excel, the gradebook software, your student information system. Of course, you may use Microsoft Word for a variety of writing reports, should you need to do that, or Excel if you are keeping track of information for administrators, whatever that happens to be. You're keeping track of that in a spreadsheet. It could be the way that you keep track of information within your classroom. It could be the manner in which you keep some personal notes, perhaps personal notes on students, in the way that you are interacting with students, and perhaps you're tracking a student in particular for discipline, and you may have a notebook in which you write that information, or you may do that on a word processor and keep that information. The way in which you do your gradebook is productivity software. The students may see that if you are on a larger system, a district-wide system where grades are reported electronically. They can see that. The gradebook here in Blackboard, where you can see your work in the Check My Grades section of the course. That's productivity, but yet it's for you as well, for you to see the progress where you are in the course. We have communication software too. For example, your email software. You communicate internally within your school, within your district. You have communication software in which you may work with other professionals outside your district. Perhaps you blog. You send out information to parents and or students through a blog. Perhaps you have some other sorts of software that you use for communication. You may be even using Twitter to communicate with parents, and as the students get older, perhaps the students too, or a combination of your audiences. Largely this is one way, although it can be two-way. It's a way for you to put your information out there for others to know what's going on in your classroom, what's happening in your school. So it's communication software. And the other one is the academic part. And notice we can have some crossover between your productivity and your academics. So you may use Microsoft Word or Google Documents or something like that for your personal record keeping, and you also use that for students to report. Students learn with that as well. You have software that you use for tutorials. You have authoring software, perhaps whether it is PowerPoint or other types of software, Google Presentations, Google Slides, that you use for students to create. Perhaps students use blogs as well. Perhaps in your school students blog, they write for authentic audiences, they write for the public, or maybe they write for the class, a blog that you can keep just for the students, so that they are writing for something just bigger than you. In other words, they're not just writing for you to grade and assess and give back to them, but they're writing for a larger audience than themselves, the classroom, the grade level, or the public internet. We have also wikis in which students can work together creatively, or perhaps they're using software for creation, such as audio, video, other types of text that they might be using. And there can be crossover of these, but I tend to classify these as things that largely teachers used for their work, the communication software, and the academic, the learning software. The authors may classify some of those as administrative, but in a sense, the productivity and administrative are the same, but we do get some crossing over then, in my definition, with some of the academic pieces. Okay, our second question for you is, I'm curious, for question number 2, of these software types that the authors describe, which has had the greatest impact on student learning? So which software do you use there for where you think you get the greatest student learning out of it? And the second part of question 2 is, what about your productivity practices, your administrative practices? Which piece of software has had the greatest impact, whether it's positive or negative, on your practice, your impact? Which one has greatly affected you and how you work and when you work and where you work and whether it's productive for you or not? Moving on back to the Jonathan short article, and something captured my eye in his work. Not only the means in which this week you are going to work with a piece of a software that you're going to create a tutorial with, which there is an example in the week 1 wiki. He uses the term meaningful learning. What is that? What is meaningful learning? And if I were to walk into your classroom, how would I see meaningful learning occurring? So what does that mean? Put his words in your context, and then how does it look in a bigger picture? What's it mean? Because actually, you know, where educational technology is really about learning. Yes, we have things, we have hardware, we have software, but how does it affect learning? And is it meaningful, according to Jonathan? And if I were to walk into your setting, walk in there and sit down, whether it's a one-on-one student situation that some of you might have, or it's a larger classroom setting, how would I know that meaningful learning is taking place? And really, in our beginning courses in 60-10, 60-30, 60-40, we are looking at instructional design to help you get to meaningful learning. And while we presented as a 6-step model, we encourage you to use it differently, to look at your objectives and your evaluation and your learning strategies first, because that is really the most significant. In particular, if you write an evaluation first, you write your rubric for a project, you write your unit exam. If that's the case for you, you then convert that back to objectives, whether they are written educationally with the educationese, some of the things that we will ask for here, or you write them as student friendly, and that's always valuable for students to have the student friendly terms, whether they are written student friendly like I can questions, or they happen to be written as study questions. And then your teaching and learning strategies. And so I'm going to ask you, after looking at week 1, that you really start to look at those strategies, whether it's Madeline Hunter, whether it's a Robert Gagne, or perhaps in your school that you have a strategy that you're required to use. That talks about instruction. It's sort of a recipe. It's a step-by-step. Madeline Hunter's step-by-step, Robert Gagne's step-by-step methodology of instruction, that you adopt these strategies. In particular, we're going to ask you to identify your strategies. Number 4, that is significant for you to carry through. The power of where we are in this digital age, the power of this educational technology is in the questions that we ask our students. And momentarily, I'm going to show you an example of this, and the goals that we want them to achieve. For example, um, if we have a goal of wanting students to improve their writing, we don't really write an objective. The goal is not we want students to use blogs. The blog is part of the strategy. It's really part of the strategy and part of the technology, which are third and fourth in this. But we want students to improve their writing. That is our learning goal, and then we can be very specific in how we want them to improve their learning goals, such as with a 5-sentence paragraph or a 3-paragraph essay, whatever that happens to be, those strategies that we use then within that. But the goal of having students write with blogs, that's really an activity. That's something that they are doing. And so these are the wrong kinds of goals that we want to be writing about. We want to ask these questions and look at these things differently. For example, in fourth grade traditionally has done the United States. It's part of the social studies curriculum, and it becomes a state report. So students go to the library, they go to the internet, they download a bunch of pictures, and they then write about the state fossil, they write about the state mineral, they write about the state bird, they write about the state capital. And so largely they are moving content from one place to another without much thinking. However, if we were to ask the students, where in Illinois would you want to live, they can write about their state, but they can write about it differently. They can do some comparing and contrasting as to, I would prefer to live in a large city than in the country, and here's why. And so with younger students, you could say to them, well, let's sit together and let's develop some criteria about what's important to us and what's not important to us. Older students, you could ask them to work in groups, perhaps second, third, fourth grade even. You would want to sit down and say, okay, here are 10, let's develop these things together. You end up with 10, and you need to have 5 in your state report about where in Illinois would you want to live. And perhaps those criteria that the students might come up with is say, some students may say, well, I like museums. And another student may say, well, I like the state parks. And someone else may say, I like the shopping. And someone else may say, I like the open spaces. And so then they would use this criteria to make their justification. They are doing some evaluation. They're doing some of those higher levels of Bloom as opposed to reporting knowledge they're copying across. Yes, they have to know about the museums. Yes, they have to know about the state park. So they have to go and do that basic kind of research. But then they give justification. They evaluate. They analyze before they write their state report. And so these are the ways that we can significantly impact our students in a digital age. This is where they can go and get large numbers of resources, very current, about museums in large cities, about the state parks across the state, about the shopping that they would like to do. This is how we can use digital resources very, very effectively, as opposed to saying, okay, students, here we are, we're here again, we're going to write our state report, and so you need to write about where the state capital is, the population, the industry, and then students essentially copy and paste. While they might be copying, so to speak, copying and pasting into their other report, they then have to analyze it and tell us why they want the things we want. And of course, it's their reasons, but they have to give us good reasons in that analysis. And that's where we would write a rubric to help us discern the student's level of analysis in their reporting. As I look at schools, as I've looked at schools over time, And I've not done any formal research on this. This is mainly by the actions that I see and the vocabulary that I hear them use. There are kind of three levels of technology. One of those levels of technology is it's a tool. All technology is a tool, and we are going to use it very much like the gardener uses the shovel. Well, you know, the gardener really wants green plants, and they don't talk about the tools. They talk about the rose garden they have. They talk about the flowers that they have. The other level that I hear about is integration. I've explained this in a variety of different settings before, but I will do this again, and that is someone buys some equipment, teachers are herded into a room, they are shown where the switches are, how it works, they might be shown how the software works, and then they are told to integrate it into their curriculum. You go back and figure it out. Regardless of whatever else you're doing, integrate this, make sure that you use this hardware, make sure you use this software, make sure you get your kids to the computer lab once or twice a week or twice a month and integrate this into what you're doing. The other way is transformational, and that is we're going to do things differently, such as asking the questions differently. Part of that transformation is not necessarily the transformation of things, but it's the transformation of our thinking. What we ask students to do. We ask students to analyze. We ask students to evaluate. We're not just looking for students to have knowledge. Yes, very, very important. But how do they take that knowledge then and apply it? How do they apply that knowledge in ways that works for them, in ways that gives them those critical skills by asking the questions of the knowledge, by pushing that knowledge to its limits to find out where it works and where it doesn't. Transformation. Transformational organizations are really difficult to find. In particular, schools that are asking the questions differently. They're just not saying, here's a one-to-one program, we're different. Really, that's really an integration setting, as opposed to looking at what we're learning, how we're learning it, and then saying we need maybe a one-to-one setting, maybe every student needs to bring in their own if that's possible, or it is maybe we need 4 or 5 pieces of technology in a classroom so students can work together, whatever those cases might be. And so my last question for you here this week is, so where does your school fit in these levels of technology? And listen to the vocabulary. Reflect on the vocabulary that you hear about. Are we talking about a tool society, a tool organization? Are we talking about an organization that talks about integration? Another one of that is infusion integration. They're largely the same activity, tools. Or are we talking about doing things differently? People leading by example, people demonstrating that for us, people providing support, large curriculum pieces coming down as transformational, and having students go, all students, compare, contrast, evaluate, give analysis to the knowledge that they are learning. So here are the 4 questions for the week, an opportunity for you to do some reflection and thinking about your practice with software and larger practices in regards to how the district acts, how the organization acts. If you're just in a school, how that school acts. Perhaps if you're in a private setting, you might be in a smaller organization, or a bigger organization that has lots of schools. What's the terminology they use, and what's the action that they use?